Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, today we are not just talking about cremation. We're diving deeper into the real question behind the question: what happens to the soul when the body burns? But I need you to lean in close, because what I'm about to share isn't just about death. It's about life, eternity, and your divine purpose. You are not your body. Let that truth sink deep into your soul. For too long, we've been conditioned to believe that our value, our identity, even our destiny are tied to flesh, to features, to form. But that's a lie, a dangerous lie. You are not this physical shell walking around, working, aging, and eventually lying in a box or in an urn. That's not the real you. That's just the housing, the earth suit, the temporary tent. And once you realize that, fear starts to lose its grip. People get scared when they think about cremation because they think it's going to hurt the soul. But the only way you believe that is if you've been taught that your body is your soul. It's not. When someone burns a house down after the tenant has moved out, that tenant doesn't suffer. Why? Because they were no longer there. The fire consumes the house, but it never touches the person who lived in it. The same is true for the body and the soul. See, you are a spiritual being first. You were spirit before you ever had a body, and you will still be spirit long after this body returns to the dust. That's how God designed it. Genesis says he breathed into man the breath of life. That word, breath, in Hebrew is ruach, which means spirit. God didn't give you a body and then figure out a way to fill it. He started with spirit. And when your spirit was placed into this earthly body, that's when your earthly journey began. But your spirit is older than your skin. Now here's the part most folks miss: the soul and the spirit don't die when the body dies. They simply transition. That's why Jesus said, "Fear not those who can kill the body, but cannot kill the soul." If cremation could damage your soul, then Jesus would have warned us about that. But he didn't, because the soul isn't in the body. It uses the body. The body is a tool, a temple, a vehicle. And when that vehicle breaks down or is laid to rest, the driver steps out. But if you're attached to your body, if you've wrapped your identity around how you look, how you feel, or how other people see you, then yes, you'll be afraid. You'll fear death. You'll fear fire. You'll even fear funerals, because you've believed that when your body ends, you end. But that's not truth. That's deception. And fear always flows where truth is absent. Let me put it like this. If someone takes your phone and throws it into the fire, it'll burn. The screen will crack, the metal will melt, and the device will be destroyed. But your number still exists. Your data still exists. You can go to another store, get another phone, and still be connected. Why? Because what made that phone valuable was never the glass or the circuits. It was what was inside. And you're the same way. You are not the device. You are the connection. You are the data. You are the intelligence. And the soul, the spirit, the essence of who you are. That's what's real. We spend so much time pampering the body, feeding it, decorating it, preserving it, but neglect the soul. We pour money into lotions, surgeries, clothes, and diets, but we won't invest 5 minutes in feeding our inner man. And then when death comes, we're shocked, we're lost, we're terrified. But death doesn't come to punish. It comes to transition. And when that transition happens, the body is done. It served its purpose. Whether it's buried, burned, or broken down by time, it has nothing left to give. But your soul, that lives on. And it will return to the source, the creator, the one who gave it. That's why cremation cannot cause suffering. Because by the time the flame touches the body, the soul is gone. It's already gone to its next assignment. Just like a soldier who finishes boot camp and leaves the barracks behind, the soul completes its earthly assignment and departs. And the shell it leaves behind. That's what gets buried. That's what gets cremated. But the soul is untouched. The soul is eternal. Fear only shows up when we're attached to what's temporary. But when you know that your real identity is spiritual, not physical, then you don't worry about what happens to the body. You steward it, you honor it, but you don't idolize it because it's not who you are. And until you get that settled in your heart, fear will continue to whisper lies. But when you truly understand that you are not your body, fear loses its power because the fire may touch the flesh, but it can never touch the soul. Fire can burn flesh, but it cannot touch essence. That's the fundamental truth we've got to understand when we ask questions about cremation and the soul. We live in a world obsessed with what we can see, touch, and feel. So when someone sees a body placed into a furnace, they immediately imagine the person still being there as if the spirit is somehow locked in the body, writhing in pain. But that idea is born from fear, not from truth. Fire may have the power to incinerate the physical, but it is powerless against the spiritual. The soul transcends the fire because the soul is not of this world. See, we've got to stop measuring spiritual realities by physical instruments. You can't put a soul on a scale. You can't take a thermometer and read the temperature of someone's purpose. You can't light a match and burn someone's calling. That's the problem. Too many people try to take eternal things and subject them to temporary tools. The moment a person breathes their last breath, the spirit departs. It doesn't wait. It doesn't linger, hoping the body will hold on a little longer. It leaves. It returns to the one who gave it. And whatever happens to the body after that, whether it's buried 6 feet under or reduced to ashes, has no bearing on the soul's journey. There's something sacred about understanding transitions. The spirit is not bound to the flesh. It's only assigned to it for a time. Think of it like a driver and a car. While the driver is in the vehicle moves. It turns, it accelerates, it brakes, and it carries the driver from place to place. But the moment the driver steps out, the car may still exist, but it no longer has purpose. The engine might still run for a moment, the radio might still play, but the journey is over. That's the body at death. That's cremation. The fire touches the vehicle, not the driver. The driver has already stepped into another dimension. The soul doesn't feel the heat of earthly flames because the soul has left the realm where earthly heat is jurisdiction. The moment the heart stops beating, the soul is no longer subject to natural laws. It no longer needs oxygen. It no longer responds to pain. It is no longer controlled by nerve endings or blood flow. That chapter is closed. The soul is now operating in a spiritual reality. And in that realm, fire cannot follow. Pain cannot reach. Death cannot dominate. This is why the ancient mystics, the prophets, and the wise understood cremation not as an act of torment, but as a release of the temporary. They understood that burning the body does not desecrate the soul because the soul is sacred regardless of the body's condition. You can burn the remains, but you cannot burn the origin. You can reduce the body to ash, but you cannot reduce the soul to fear. The fire is a physical phenomenon. It doesn't reach into the spirit. It doesn't have access. Fear, however, has a way of making people forget what they already know deep inside. The fear of fire is real because fire on earth causes pain. We've all touched a hot stove or burned our fingers. So we project that experience onto the concept of cremation. We imagine the soul still feeling what the body would feel. But that's imagination rooted in misunderstanding. It assumes the soul is still present in a body that has completed its purpose. It assumes the invisible is still trapped in the visible. But the truth is, the soul cannot be trapped by matter. It was never born of matter, and it cannot be held by it. There is a reason ancient scripture speaks of the soul returning to its maker, because the soul comes from eternity, and when its mission in time is complete, it goes back. Cremation is not an assault on the soul. It is a form of closure for the body. And once the body is empty, what happens to it doesn't affect what once lived inside of it. That's why we don't weep for a house when the residents move out. We may reflect on the memories, the structure, the years spent there, but we understand that the people are gone and the house is now just a shell. That's the body in cremation, a shell, an empty vessel returning to the earth in accelerated form. So when the fire comes, it comes to finalize a process, not to inflict pain. The pain was in life. The struggle was in the journey. The sickness, the injury, the decline, that was the hard part. And death is the release. And cremation is not a punishment, but a practical step that follows. It doesn't harm. It doesn't hinder. It doesn't hold back. Because the soul transcends the fire. The fire may rage, the heat may rise, but the soul has already risen higher. People ask if the soul suffers during cremation, but what they're really asking is whether what we believe about death has the power to shape our experience of it. The answer is yes. Absolutely it does. Belief is the blueprint for your soul's condition. You see, pain is not always a product of physical experience. Sometimes it's the product of perception. And perception is determined by what you've been taught, what you've accepted as truth, and what you've chosen to internalize. So when someone dies in fear, not because of death itself, but because of what they believe death means, that fear didn't start in the furnace. It started long before, in the heart, in the mind, in the soul. The soul is not some passive element drifting around inside the body, waiting to be released. It is active. It is engaged. It is influenced by what you feed it. You feed your soul with truth, it grows strong. You feed your soul with fear, it begins to tremble under the weight of lies. And the most dangerous thing about lies is that they often come wrapped in tradition, in religious misunderstanding, in cultural myths passed down for generations. If you believe that cremation causes your soul to scream in agony, then you've been taught to believe your soul is still bound to your flesh, even after life has left it. But belief does not make something true. It just makes it real for the person who believes it. That's why what you believe matters more than you think. The person who has a revelation of truth does not fear the fire. The person who knows their soul belongs to God and not to the grave is not shaken by how their body is treated after death, because they understand that the body is just the outer frame. It is the vehicle, not the traveler, the packaging, not the product. When the body dies, the soul is not sitting inside it, waiting to be burned. The soul is already gone, already released, already returned to its origin. But when belief is wrong, fear remains. And when fear remains, suffering starts, not in the fire, but in the mind. This is why two people can experience the same death and yet carry completely different energies around it. One departs in peace, knowing where their soul is headed, completely unconcerned about what happens to the body afterward. The other departs with anxiety, wondering whether the flames will reach beyond the flesh. It's not the fire that creates torment. It's the belief. And it's not the cremation that causes suffering. It's the soul that hasn't been taught truth. Fear of cremation is simply fear of the unknown, wrapped in superstition and tied with a ribbon of misinformation. The truth is, the soul is not in the body at the time of cremation. But the problem is, most people don't think like that because they never train their minds to think beyond the natural. They never examined their belief systems. They were handed ideas, never questioned them, and let fear become their guide. But fear is a liar, and belief becomes a prison when it's built on lies. If you believe the soul can be trapped in a dead body, then you believe the soul is weak. If you believe the soul can be harmed by physical fire, then you don't yet understand what the soul really is. You've got to understand that suffering isn't always physical. In fact, most suffering people experience has nothing to do with their environment and everything to do with their expectations. If you expect death to be torment, you will live your life dreading it. If you expect the soul to feel the fire, you will leave this world afraid. But if you align your belief with truth, you walk into eternity in peace. You rise out of your body with clarity. You leave behind not only the shell of your body, but also the lies that once limited your soul. Most people spend their whole lives preparing their body for the world and never once prepare their soul for eternity. They invest in appearance but ignore alignment. They plan for retirement but forget resurrection. They live from the outside and instead of from the inside out. So when death comes knocking, they're terrified, not because death is so powerful, but because their soul is so unprepared. The soul doesn't suffer because of fire. It suffers because of confusion, disconnection, and distance from truth. Your belief is the lens through which your soul perceives every experience. If that lens is cracked, your understanding will always be distorted. A distorted understanding leads to distorted emotions, and those emotions take root deep in the soul. But when you repair the lens with truth, when you begin to see clearly that the soul and the body are not bound together after death, you stop fearing the process of cremation altogether. The soul doesn't cling to the ashes, and it doesn't cry out from the flame. It's already moved on. It's already answered to a higher calling. It's already returned to its source. But if your belief hasn't caught up to that reality, then your fear will try to rewrite your experience, even in death. There's a difference between honoring something and worshiping it. That distinction might seem subtle, but it carries profound consequences. When it comes to the human body, we are taught to take care of it, nourish it, and respect it, and that is good. But the problem begins when that respect turns into idolatry, when people start thinking the body is the most sacred part of their existence, when they begin to elevate the temporary above the eternal. The body is a temple, yes, but it is not the deity. The Creator is not the body. He is the one who formed it from dust and breathed life into it. And when you begin to worship the creation more than the Creator, confusion follows, fear follows, even fear of cremation follows. You see, people are so attached to their physical form that they begin to believe that what happens to the body somehow affects the soul. But the soul is not sustained by muscle, skin, or breath. The soul existed before the lungs filled with air, and it will continue after the heart stops beating. So the idea that burning the body can bring harm to the soul stems from a misunderstanding of what we really are. The body is a house. It is not the homeowner. The soul moves in, lives its purpose, and when its time is done, it moves out. To cling to the house after the tenant has left is to miss the entire point of life and death. The reason so many people struggle with cremation is because they have allowed the body to become a symbol of their identity. They have invested so much in the flesh that they think losing it means losing themselves. But if your identity is rooted in your appearance, your height, your strength, or your physical presence, then death will feel like an erasure. If your body is your God, then cremation feels like desecration. But if your soul is your essence and God is your source, then what happens to your body becomes secondary. It is not disrespectful to cremate a body that has fulfilled its purpose. It is simply a different way of releasing it back to the earth. Now, this isn't to say that rituals don't matter. Honoring the dead is a sacred act. Funerals, last rites, memorials, these things help the living grieve and show respect for the journey the person completed. But there's a fine line between honoring and clinging. When people place all their hope and reverence in the body, they begin to resist the natural order. They fear decay. They fear burial. They fear fire. Not because any of these things are inherently evil, but because they believe the spirit is trapped in the flesh. That belief leads to unnecessary suffering, not for the deceased, but for those left behind. That's why the focus must shift. We must learn to honor the body as a gift, not a god. The body served a beautiful purpose. It carried a soul. It walked through time. It bore the marks of experience. It was the visible form through which love was expressed and purpose was fulfilled. But once its mission is complete, it is not meant to be idolized. It is not meant to be preserved forever. Dust to dust is not a curse. It's a reminder that we came from the earth, but we are not bound to it. A reminder that what is eternal cannot be burned, buried, or broken. When you understand that truth, your relationship with the body changes. You begin to care for it not out of obsession, but out of stewardship. You take care of your health, not because you fear death, but because you respect the life you've been given. And when death comes, you release the body with reverence, not desperation. You allow it to return to the elements, whether through burial or cremation, because you know the soul is already in the hands of its maker. The fear of cremation dies the moment the soul is no longer confused about its origin. Too many people plan their funerals down to the last detail, picking out caskets, designing headstones, and choosing floral arrangements, but they never spend time asking the deeper questions. What happens after the last breath? Where does the soul go? How do I prepare for that journey? They're so focused on preserving the exterior that they neglect the interior. But the body will always expire. No matter how much we try to delay it, hide it, or disguise it, the flesh has an end. The soul does not. So the greatest dishonor is not cremating the body. It's forgetting to awaken the soul while you still have time. The act of cremation does not insult the soul. The fire that consumes the body has no reach into eternity. What truly honors the body is living a life of integrity while it is alive. What truly honors the soul is preparing it for what comes after this life is over. To honor the Creator is to align yourself with His truth, and His truth says that life is more than flesh and blood. His truth says the soul is what matters most. The body is a tool, the soul is the treasure. The tool will return to dust, but the treasure belongs to eternity. The idea that the soul might suffer during cremation often comes from an emotional attachment to the physical form. When you've spent a lifetime identifying with your body, how it looks, how it moves, how it feels, it's easy to start believing that you are your body. That belief becomes deeply ingrained, especially when pain, pleasure, illness, or beauty have shaped your understanding of who you are. But when death arrives, it demands a separation between what is temporary and what is eternal. That separation reveals the truth. You are not your body. You never were. The body is the costume. The soul is the actor. The body is the stage, the soul is the story. And cremation doesn't erase the story. It just closes the curtain on the stage. People fear cremation because they imagine the soul somehow lingering inside the body, feeling the flames, trapped, helpless, and in pain. But that fear is built on the wrong blueprint. It's like worrying that a bird will burn when the cage is set on fire, not realizing the bird already flew away. When the heart stops beating and the breath leaves the lungs, something sacred happens. The soul departs. It doesn't stick around waiting to see what happens to the remains. The soul is not subject to physical destruction because it was never made of physical material. Fire can reduce bone to ash, but it can't even scratch the soul. This truth is not new. It's ancient. Cultures across centuries have recognized that the body is only one layer of existence. Philosophers, prophets, sages, and spiritual teachers have all pointed to the same truth. The soul comes from a realm untouched by fire or decay. And if that's true, then no amount of cremation can cause the soul to suffer. The suffering only exists in the minds of those who haven't been taught to separate body, consciousness from soul awareness. That suffering is passed from generation to generation in the form of fear-based rituals, superstitions, and stories that don't serve the soul. They trap it. When people ask whether the soul suffers in cremation, they're often not really asking about the soul. They're expressing grief, uncertainty, and confusion. They're looking for comfort in the middle of loss. And what they need is not a clinical answer. They need spiritual clarity. Clarity that sets them free from the illusion that burning the body somehow burns the spirit. Clarity that reassures them that their loved one is not caught in a flame, but carried into light. That kind of clarity only comes when we stop feeding fear and start feeding faith. You can't touch the soul with fire, just like you can't silence music by breaking the instrument. The music was never inside the strings or the wood. It came through it. Likewise, the soul expresses itself through the body, but it is not confined to it. Cremation doesn't destroy a person. It simply brings closure to the chapter of physical life. If we understood that, we'd stop placing so much energy on preserving the shell and start focusing on nurturing the essence. The body will return to the earth no matter what method is used. Cremation simply speeds up a process that nature has always completed. What truly matters is not how the body is handled after death, but how the soul was handled during life. Was it cultivated? Was it awakened? Was it aligned with its creator? Because whether buried or burned, the condition of the soul at the time of departure is what determines its peace. If the soul leaves the body with fear, guilt, confusion, or regret, it carries that into the next realm. But if it leaves in faith, clarity, love, and alignment, it carries that instead. Cremation doesn't cause suffering, it exposes whether the soul was prepared for what's next. We have to learn to release our attachment to form. That attachment is what causes most of our pain. We think we're grieving the loss of a person, but often we're grieving the loss of their presence, their voice, their face, their touch, all of which were expressed through the body. But the soul is still very real, very alive. The connection doesn't die just because the form has changed. Just like the flame that lights a candle is not destroyed when the candle burns out, the fire exists independent of the wax. The soul continues, and if you truly grasp that, then cremation becomes less frightening and more freeing. Understanding the nature of the soul means shifting your perspective from fear to freedom, from ritual to revelation. The soul is not a victim of death, it's a graduate. It's not destroyed by cremation, it's released. When the body falls away, what's left is what always mattered most. And that truth invites us to stop focusing on what the fire touches and start focusing on what the fire can never reach. That's where peace lies, not in preserving the physical, but in awakening to the eternal. One of the most powerful truths you can ever embrace is that the soul is governed by laws different from the body. The body is governed by time, space, gravity, matter, and decay. But the soul operates by spiritual laws, truth, intention, alignment, and divine origin. When we confuse those two realms, that's when fear takes hold. That's when myths become our masters. People begin to associate the fate of the soul with the fate of the flesh. So when cremation is mentioned, their mind runs wild with images of pain, torment, and loss. But that fear is a product of confusion, not reality. It's the result of seeing through the lens of the physical world and forgetting that the soul doesn't obey the same rules as the body. When you understand that the body is finite and the soul is infinite, something inside you shifts. The soul cannot be burned because it was never made of anything combustible. It's not wood or bone or skin, it's energy. It's breath. It's consciousness. It's spirit. It is connected to the divine. Fire can touch what's made from earth, but it cannot touch what came from heaven. So when people grieve over a body that is being cremated, they often do so out of deep reverence, but also out of misunderstanding. They don't realize that what they're looking at, the body, is not where the person they love resides anymore. That body was a temporary vessel. The real person, the real essence, has already returned to its source. What's interesting is how much energy people put into the appearance of death rather than the truth of what happens after it. We dress up the body, we style the hair, we arrange flowers, and we set up elaborate ceremonies. And none of that is wrong. Ceremony can be healing. But when we start believing that the soul's experience is tied to those external actions, we lose the core truth. The soul doesn't linger in the casket. It doesn't flinch in the flames. It's already transitioned. The condition of the soul in that moment has nothing to do with the fire beneath the body, everything to do with the fire that burned within the life. That's why it's so important to live your life with soul alignment. Because when you come to the end of your days, what matters most is not how you are laid to rest, but how you lived while you were awake. Were you honest with yourself? Did you fulfill your purpose? Did you love without condition? Did you seek truth or settle for tradition? These are the questions that shape the condition of the soul, not the temperature of the fire. The fire of cremation only returns the body to ash. It doesn't define your journey, your worth, or your eternal destiny. The biggest fear around cremation is often rooted in the idea that if the body is treated a certain way, it might disturb the soul's peace. But that perspective gives too much power to the material and not enough understanding of the spiritual. The soul is not fragile like glass. It is forged from eternal strength. It doesn't get bruised by fire. It's not confined to carbon. It is light. And that light can't be dimmed by what happens to the body after death. If the soul is aligned, it rises. If it is disconnected, it still rises, but it carries with it the echoes of what it believed and practiced during life. That's the real question we need to ask, not what happens to the body, but what happens to the beliefs that lived in the soul. If your soul believed it was one with the Creator, that death was not the end, but the beginning, then cremation is simply a formality. It's not a threat. It's not an interruption. It's a transition. But if the soul believed that it was its body, that it was its name, its house, its job, its culture, then death will feel like a theft. Cremation will feel like destruction. And that's not because of the fire. It's because of the misunderstanding that preceded it. You can't build spiritual peace on physical rituals alone. True peace comes from spiritual preparation. When your soul is awake, aligned, and ready, nothing that happens to your body can shake your sense of purpose. Whether you are buried or burned, embalmed or scattered, the condition of your soul remains untouched by the physical process. The fire outside cannot reach what has already ascended. This is why preparation for death is not about planning the ceremony, it's about preparing the soul. When you live in truth, you leave in peace. When you live by spirit, you transcend fear. And when you know who you are beyond the body, you lose all fear of what happens to it after you're gone.